Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. My name's Dan with another episode of Exploder just for you. Now, when I'm talking about wrestling, I've talked about a lot of stuff in history. I like to get in a lot of nostalgia. I know I talk about the 90s a lot. I came into wrestling in 1992 when I started watching. Like I've covered before, I saw a Superstars match with the Nasty Boys. That's my introduction to pro wrestling. So I talk about the 90s a lot, and there were some dark times in the WWF at the time, you know, pandas, between 1990, let's say 3, and really mid-1997. Not a great time. One of the lowest points in the company's history was 1995. And during this time, it just seemed like they were doing a lot of gimmicks. Guys were race car drivers, you know, Bob Holly or Thurman Sparky Plug, for all you old school guys. There was a lot of weird gimmicks. There were Duke the Dumpster Drosy, Bastion Booger, and the like. In this episode, I want to talk about not only a time during this time, but also a forgotten faction. And it's a faction that exists primarily to sort of give a bunch of guys something to do, to keep a guy a stalwart of the 1980s, to keep going in the company, in a company slowly becoming irrelevant in. And that's right, I'm talking about the $1 Million Corporation. It's often forgotten during this time, and honestly rightfully so, but the $1 Million Corporation lasted from May of 1994 till May of 1996. Think about that. Think about a faction lasting that long. This isn't common. People remember D-Generation X lasting quite a while. It was one of the top ones. The NWO lasted way longer than it should have. And then it had the reunion tours, and then the reunion tours, and then so on and so forth, you know. And even things like the corporation didn't last long. The corporate ministry didn't last. Like, these weren't things that lasted years, but the $1 Million Corporation, the original $1 Million Corporation, lasted about 2 years. And that's saying something, especially at this time where things were sort of going seemingly on a month-to-month basis. After his wrestling days were numbered and had finished around 1993, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, transitioned throughout the company, sort of trying to find his place. He first started doing some announcing with Vince McMahon, and that did okay, but again, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, was a better character on his own than he was putting other characters over. It's nothing against him, he's just such a strong character, it just made more sense to have him put somebody else over. It had him be a manager or a character and get heat than do the Jesse Ventura role or the Bobby Heenan role and put it on someone else. So after he leaves, he stops wrestling, he does announcing, and then they decide to bring him back into a managerial role. So it started in May of 1994 when Ted DiBiase did an interview and announced that he had purchased the services of Nikolai Volkoff, who had fallen on hard times since his gimmick had become irrelevant 3 years ago. He treated Volkoff as a manservant. He was wearing a tuxedo shirt, which was classy, and had him do random tasks. He would have him wear the shirt would have the tuxedo, and it would say the property of the $1 Million Man, and he would have these gold, cent signs. As Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, had the dollar signs, well, of course, Volkoff was not at his level, so he had the cent signs. And it was a nice little, again, for the time, it was a nice little piece of business. It did what it needed to do, and it wasn't bad. Then he had eventually purchased the services of Bam Bigelow from Luna Vachon, and his former Money Incorporated tag team partner, IRS, who was still getting them tax cheats all those years later. On the June 11, 1994 Raw, the $1 Million Man said he had acquired his biggest contract yet. He had acquired the services of The Undertaker. And not only that, he had someone who looked an awfully lot like The Undertaker. Now, The Undertaker, of course, was out from the Royal Rumble 1994, where it took Yokozuna, Crush, and 14 guys and a semi-truck plus Magic to put him down into the casket. Now, he's out for a while. He misses WrestleMania that year in real life because of an injury, and he promises that the $1 Million Man promises the new $1 Million Corporation has acquired The Undertaker. Indicative of the quality of talent the $1 Million Corporation had and would actually prove to have in the future, The Undertaker proved to be Brian Lee before he discovered what a motorcycle was, and he was beaten by the real Undertaker at SummerSlam 1994 in what many refer to as confusing. In addition to the knockoff Undertaker being, well, knocked off, the $1 Million Corporation also added members at SummerSlam. Native American Tatanka. This was actually a well-done program, especially at the time. This was spent months and months where many people, including Tatanka, the biggest critic, accused Lex Luger of being the one who was going to sell out. The all-American Lex Luger was going to sell out to the $1 Million Man, and the $1 Million Man, to his credit, didn't really disavow this, sort of let it go on and let people pretend and think. And there were these little situations, these misunderstandings between Tatanka and Lex Luger. And then when the time came when you think finally it's going to happen and Lex Luger's going to join. Who joins? Tatanka! That's right. In a kind of swerve that gave Vince Russo a boner, Tatanka betrayed the fans, his Native American heritage, and sold out to the $1 Million Corporation. Now that, again, as a program, not that bad. At the 1994 Survivor Series, 80s stalwart and Humpty Dumpty stunt double King Kong Bundy joined the corporation probably because the Shockmaster wasn't available. Bundy teamed with Tatanka, Bigelow, and the Heavenly Bodies, remember them? To get beaten by Lex Luger, Adam Bomb, the Smoking Guns, and Mabel in a classic match from 1994, which is probably an oxymoron. But let's keep going. The highest profile the corporation would enjoy was when Bam Bigelow faced Lawrence Taylor in the main event of WrestleMania 11, one of the worst WrestleManias of all time, but go with me here. Bigelow would be flanked by fellow $1 Million Corporation members, while Taylor would be joined by NFL All-Stars who would take whatever WWF would pay them in 1995. So on one side was King Kong Bundy, and the other was Steve McMichael, so that's pretty much a draw. Following the inevitable defeat at the hands of the known coke addict and future solicitor of a 16-year-old girl, no, I'm not joking, Bigelow would eventually be kicked out of the $1 Million Corporation, seemingly for main eventing a pay-per-view and ruining their streak. Over time, DiBiase would recruit Kama, the Supreme Fighting Machine, to steal the Undertaker's urn, melt it down, and make it into a necklace that contained way more gold than the urn ever did. This led to Paul Bearer to just get a larger urn, and the Undertaker beating Kama like everyone else used to. In fitting fashion, the Undertaker would defeat IRS at the Royal Rumble 1995, and then King Kong Bundy at WrestleMania 11, in a match that made the Giant Gonzalez match look fast. Following this, the corporation would add 2 high-profile members, no less, Psycho Sid and the 1-2-3 Kid, after they turned on Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon respectively. Keep in mind, this was a year and a half before Sid would be world champion, and a year before Kid ended up in a diaper. Again, yes, I'm serious. IRS and King Kong Bundy would leave the WWF, with IRS leaving for the greener pastures of WCW, and King Kong Bundy leaving to break wooden rings on the indies. That's a real thing that really happened. Warning. The following is the work of satire for a wrestling podcast. All comments were curated from existing interviews and do not necessarily represent the views of Vince McMahon or WB Incorporated. And seriously, if you think I'm important enough to get an interview with Vince McMahon, it says more about you than it does me. Hello, Vince. May I call you Vince?
Mr. Austin?
It's not my name, but okay.
First of all, I'm not afraid of The Undertaker, not afraid of Bret Hart, not afraid of you, not afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, not afraid of any man in this arena, not afraid of any man who walks on this earth. I am fearless.
Kind of an odd way to start an interview, but all right. All right, let's get right to it. Tell me about your children.
My testicles are the size of grapefruits.
You should probably get that looked at. Also, how do you explain the disparity between stars in NXT and how they're treated when they reach the main roster?
I enjoy destroying lives.
What would you tell the fans?
Life sucks, and then you die.
But what about wrestling fans?
What was that phrase you just used?
Wrestling?
We're in the sports entertainment business.
Yeah, you've been very clear about that. You're 73 years old. How do you feel?
I hurt all over.
I'm amazed by your candor. All right, changing gears. Why don't you like Ted Turner?
He's a son of a bitch.
Right. Any other reason?
He made me beg.
Okay.
He made me cry.
I didn't know you could do that.
He made me get down on my knees.
All right, that's enough of that story.
I am no pervert.
Well, you have suggested a couple incest storylines.
No question about it.
But let's move on. The WWE...
I created it.
Right, but you fired Arn Anderson, 2 writers and an agent have quit, and wrestlers are trying to get out of their contracts left and right. What's going on in the WWE right now?
Chaos, obviously.
And how do you plan on fixing it?
I'm gonna kill my creation.
Interesting plan.
I'm gonna kill it.
You sure that's a good idea?
I'm Vince McMahon.
Didn't know that was in dispute, but anyway. So you're telling me you're just giving up at this point?
No question about it.
Wow, that's concerning.
I look at it from a different standpoint.
Such as?
Well, I will certainly take responsibility for any decision I've ever made. I've never had a problem doing that. Not that all of my decisions are accurate. They're not.
Yeah, anyone who watched the WWF in 1995 could have told you that. So what are your plans going forward?
I think I'm going to go to the nearest nudie bar and have a drink.
But how does that address... So your new plan is...
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
That's the new plan?
Well, we can either do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
What are you getting at?
This is a strange business.
Yeah, you said the N-word on live TV. We know.
It's It's me, Austin! It was me all along!
I don't see... What? Back on topic. What are your plans for the WWE Network?
Well, actually, things are going real well with the XFL. I'm glad you asked.
So you're just going to answer whatever question you want now? All right, screw it. How'd you get rid of Todd Pettengill?
With a lethal dose of poison.
Can't blame you there. Anything else you'd like to tell the listeners?
I've lost all faith in humanity.
We both have. Any chance I could get a job?
No chance in hell!
Okay, that was just your theme song.
You're fired!
Well, lasted longer than I thought I would. Are you even trying anymore?
What a ridiculous statement.
Oh, but answering a question with a song clip is perfectly fine. I see how it is.
You want to let me finish here for a second, pal?
Gladly.
Oh, you disappoint me.
Me? I didn't create Bastion Booger, so who's disappointing who here?
Shut your mouth and let me answer the question, all right? I'll be happy to answer.
Sure, go ahead.
Where the hell are your values?
Somewhere higher than yours.
Where were you in my hour of need?
Watching WCW until you got rid of the fake Diesel. What do you think?
You might have some support from this audience, but 95% of them are idiots.
Who said I had an audience? Anyway, that's going to do it for our interview. All things considered, thank you for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to share before you go?
I am no pervert.
I'll take your word for it. In one of the more, let's say, interesting developments in the group's history, DiBiase also brought in Santa Claus, the evil brother of Santa Claus, who was from the South Pole and stole presents. I know what I said. Tatanka and Kama would leave the WF in early 1996 because Tatanka had pretty much run his course at the company, and Kama was really considering something to do with pimping. Wonder whatever happened to that. The 1-2-3 Kid lasted until May 1996 before attending rehab, then go to WCW, which seemed like a natural fit. Sid would retire during this time due to injury and leave the $1 Million Corporation basically extinct. Following the bankruptcy of a fictional corporation, which is actually quite impressive, DiBiase went back to the well and brought back the $1 Million Belt, something you hadn't seen since the early 90s. Awarding it to some jobber named the Ringmaster. You know, the new character would last only a few months, with the Ringmaster losing a Caribbean strap match to Savio Vega, forcing the $1 Million Man to leave the WWF forever. The Ringmaster would go on to be everyone's favorite anti-authority bad boy, Mark Marrow, and thus ends not only the era of the $1 Million Corporation, but also Ted DiBiase's time in the WWF. For a career that lasted so long as a performer, and he did so much, it's kind of sad to see someone like the $1 Million Man go out with a whimper. But that's the wrestling business. So what's there to say about the $1 Million Corporation? It was a group of low and mid-card heels with a few wins and even less logic. They were together for 2 years. They were basically the 1960s Batman villains with less credibility, but it had done something that few factions had managed to do, to stay together for a period of time, and it was not treated like a stable. Jimmy Hart would have these stables. Bobby, even the Heenan family, the much revered Heenan family, was more of a stable because Bobby Heenan would represent Andre the Giant and the Brooklyn Brawler. Certainly not at the same time, but you know what I'm saying. This was actually a faction, a true faction that backed each other up on every occasion. And along the way, they even managed a main event of WrestleMania. Maybe not the best WrestleMania, maybe not the best opponent, but that's saying something when you're able to when you're being a manager and you're able to manage somebody in the main event of WrestleMania, regardless of the quality, that's still saying something for basically a low-level group. Sure, they were a hodgepodge of misfit toys and a bunch of weirdos, oddballs, and Nikolai Volkoff, but again, they accomplished so much in 2 years at a time where things were going on a monthly basis. I mean, Man Mountain Rock came and was fired in the amount of time that this corporation existed. Very short. Rad Radford. I mean, you could name guys who got hired into the company and were eventually either quit or let go during the time this corporation existed, if you really think about that. That tells you the longevity of this seemingly innocuous gimmick. So to close out, do you have any memories of the $1 Million Corporation? Anything you want to share? Anything you want to dig out the back of your mind and really dig out and admit to people? Do you remember them? Do you remember the group? Do you remember anything they did? I mean, this, like I said, 1995, 1996, not the greatest time, and this was not exactly one of the biggest groups. I mean, the NWO was much bigger. The NWO came in right at the tail end of this, and Ted DiBiase would become part of that group. But this was still a group that, for its time, it wasn't bad. It was a low-level guys, and they did more. Honestly, they did more than they ever had any right to. But do you have any memories? If you have any memories, feel free to share them on the page. Message me. If you have any questions or whatever for a future episode, let me know. Again, I'm a member of the ZTO Podcast Network. We're doing a bunch of great things here. If you are in Lima, again, I don't know how many people locally listen to this, but we're doing Comedy Outlaws, May 11th at Legends Tavern. That's on Cole Street. Very great bar. We're going to go there and we're going to do a live show. Show up and go up, come up, see everybody. You're going to see a couple pro comics, and then you're going to see, maybe your buddy can tell a couple jokes that aren't racist. Let's hope. So anyway, Just a little heads up, that's what we're doing. After that, we were doing a podcast session at Gromy's on May 18th. I know in June we have the Gromy Show makes a live return, and just in general, we're just doing a lot of stuff locally. So if you're a Lima guy or you're a Lima girl and you're local and you want to know what this whole ZTO thing is about, you want to know what Lima Land Comedy's about, come on out to Legends, come on out to Gromy's, and see what we have about. Until next time, my name's Dan. This is Exploder. Have a good one.